Welcome back into the Blacksburg Buzz. Today we're breaking down this Georgia Tech game, a sloppy game for both sides, really. Hokies won 21 to 6, so you got that 15-point margin, not too bad on paper. Expected a decent win for Tech, but at the same time, things just didn't really go as planned for either side. A lot of sloppiness, a lot of disappointing drives ending in punts, and you thought you were going to get a little bit more offense out of both teams in this game. That's just not what happened. Now, obviously, Georgia Tech missing Haynes King. He's been battling an injury for a couple of weeks, which was a really weird situation this week. It was reported early on that likely he wouldn't be ready for the weekend. And uh, coach was kind of saying, hey, he's probably playing. He's good, but quote from him, no one knows his status except for him. Like, what? There were definitely people within the team, doctors, his mom perhaps, that knew his status ahead of time. Even as late as Thursday, Friday, really early Saturday morning, the game plan was still that he was going to be available for this game, and he was just kind of like a question mark, but they were saying he would probably be there. And of course, he didn't play, but it felt like no one was expecting him to play. Just kind of a weird situation there with King, where trying to convince the public and Virginia Tech that he was going to be there to prepare for him, even though it didn't really feel like anyone I had talked to had any sense that he was even trending towards playing this weekend. And of course, he didn't. So, just an odd situation there. Now, before we go further into this game, let's talk about our video sponsor, Bet Online. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip off to buzzer beaters, Bet Online has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during games. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, to political props. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. So there were a bunch of guys who I was somewhat impressed with during this game for the Hokies. Benji Gosnell is usually one that's up there, and he was again this weekend. 5 catches for 59 yards. The Gosnell bros, they're just active on the field. They get a lot of catches. They don't always have the big explosive plays that maybe Jalen Lane does, or the potential game-winning catches like Felton almost had at Miami. But Benji and Steven just keep things moving. They get catches at good times. It feels like they're always available, consistent receivers. And that's been huge for this team. You get a couple guys who are just out there working hard, rack up a few catches, keep things moving, keep the pressure on, and spread the wealth a little bit on the offense. And that's exactly what they've done. Benji, once again, just under 60 yards and the 5 catches. Just a solid receiver out there for the group, and you can't really ask for much more than that. He shows up every week and he gets his job done, and it feels like whenever they give him a good scheme to get open and in a good play when Tech needs a boost of offense, him and Steven are right there to get things moving, and that's what they've really done all season. He does it once again this weekend, so you got to mention that. Also, Kyron Drones, what a weird game for him. He didn't look super great in the passing game, but you get the rushing, receiving, and passing touchdown. Not how I expected things to go for the Hokies at all. I mean, first touchdown of the game for Tech, and it's a Kyron Drones receiving touchdown. Weird, fun, and crazy. I mean, no one saw that coming. That was certainly not something that if I was betting, I would have money on. I mean, it it's not too often when you see a guy rush, receive, and throw for a touchdown. So, just a little fun thing there from drones. All points for the Hokies outside of extra points, of course, courtesy of Kyron Drones. So, just a fun day for him. I'm sure he really enjoyed that. Also, gotta mention, Peter Moore was punting pretty well. He had a lot of opportunities to punt, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But I thought he had some pretty good punts. Closed in on 60 yards at least once, and it seemed like he was placing the ball pretty well, and you got to give him props for that as well. Also, Bashal Tootin, 17 rushes for 80 yards. It's been a little while since he was sub 100 and didn't get into the end zone. He did go down late in the game, though, which is pretty worrying. The Hokies had a decent lead. They kept things moving, probably tried to put a few more points on the board, and we're not really sure what's going on with Tootin's injury. Uh, it could be season changing for this team, though, if he misses, even one or two games. That could really change the tide for the Hokies in a negative way. I've seen reports about him in a boot after the game, which could be precautionary, but who really knows? A boot could mean something, it could not mean something. There's really not much else surrounding that story except for there's a report that he was wearing a boot with no additional comments to that. But at the same time, I also heard a report that he was fine, and if the game was closer, he would have been right back in there to get some more touches. So, little bit of an interesting situation there to be aware of because when you lose Tootin, I think the offense kind of is going to collapse a lot outside of that. He's been the workhorse back. He's been by far the most productive offensive player. And when you take away that run game like you do with Tootin out of the game, it forces you into the passing situation. And while Tech has games that they can pass really well, it's been somewhat inconsistent. They've had a lot of trouble throwing deep balls and deeper routes and whatnot. So when you limit yourself that much, that could be a real issue for Tech in the long run. But at this point, we really don't know what things are going to look like with Tootin. He's certainly going to be a key piece to this team as long as he's available for the rest of the season. And you hope the guy's okay because clearly one of the best running backs that the Hokies have seen in several years and probably up there with the best they've ever seen. So, not a guy that you want to lose, especially coming down to the last couple weeks of the season. You're making that final push, working towards bowl eligibility with an outside, very tough chance for an ACC championship game. But, there is still that chance, but you can't make it if you don't win out. You just can't with that loss to Miami. You need to win all the way out. You have to hope that someone else in the conference loses an ACC game. But if those things do happen, you'd like to be in the position where you're the next one up. So hopefully Tootin's available for Tech. They're really going to need him. But at this point, no one really has any information now. I imagine there'll be some more coming out in the press conferences coming up this week, but at this point, we really don't have much. A couple other guys that were really solid for the Hokies on the defense, Jalen Jones, 6 tackles with a 25-yard interception. It was pretty much right in front of me. I got a cool picture of it, although you couldn't really see the ball too well, but I did get a picture because I was on the sidelines photographing for this game where you could see the receiver kind of got the ball in his hand, but didn't really secure it, sort of jumbling around. And you could see it fall out, and then Jalen Jones cutting right in and, snagging that. I got a good juke move on his return from that as well in a photo. So he played pretty well as far as I'm concerned. That interception was really big. It was starting to get later into the game, and that was one of the big plays that really started putting the game away in a lot of senses. You're getting to an important point, in that late span where it's a tough game to get back into for Georgia Tech, but there's still time on the clock and the ability to do it. And, when you get a big interception like that, you get all the way down the field, that really, really put the Yellow Jackets in a tough spot. It kills a lot of time. It gives the Hokies back the ball. Not something you want if you're the visitors. It was about midway through the third, and the Hokies, off the interception, just made their way down the field, added to the score, and that got them pretty far up there, slowly getting out of reach. About a one-score game, I believe, before that. So that was a really big play to start getting things a little bit further along, add on to the lead, and, do it right as you're getting into the fourth quarter. It's a big moment for Tech right there, thanks to Jalen Jones. Also, Panay and Keller were playing pretty well. Additionally, just seemed really active on the defense, loading up the stat box with some tackles. Those two guys breaking through that Georgia Tech O line. They're pretty effective in a lot of ways. Kelly Lawson was as well. 3 tackles, a 14-yard interception. And Keontae Jenkins, 10 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He was all over the place, too. This defense was exciting in a lot of ways. They did give up a lot of yards, but they made a couple of big plays. Sort of hot and cold in this game, but you definitely got a sense that there's a lot of these young guys that are going to be really exciting in the next few years to come. As long as the Hokies can retain him, there's a lot of young talent, especially on this defense, that has the potential to develop into very, very good football players. I mean, you think about Woodson and a bunch of other guys, they should be super exciting over the next 2, 3, 4 seasons. This group of guys, this core, could be really nasty coming up. Now, after this game, just thinking about it, you gotta play better than that. You got the win, 15-point margin, but with a performance like this, you're not beating Georgia Tech if they had their quarterback Haynes King. And unless Kyle McCord throws 3 pick sixes and 5 interceptions again, like he did against Pitt, you probably won't beat Syracuse on the road playing like this either. You just need to have a little bit more. 10 punts, a fumble on the very first play of the game after the initial kickoff. Not a great start. The offense needed to move a lot better. You wanted to see some better reads out there from drones, a little bit more on the deep passes, just mixing things up. But all in all, it just a little bit of a sleepy game from the Hokies. And they did come out with the win, which is good. Keeps them in a solid position to keep moving through this season, to stay within a long reach, but a reach of, getting into that ACC championship game. You need some things to break your way. You need a team like SMU or Miami to lose. But if those things do happen, you're still in a position to be the next guy up, which is really important for this crew. You want to finish at a good position in the ACC. So at the very least, it can help you with your recruiting. You can see the progress. You want to see the progress and the progression in your record as well. And I think if they do that, all in all, you have some disappointing moments that you want back in the season. You're probably still going to look at it as somewhat of a what if you just could have gotten a couple more of those wins. But you still see development with the team, which is important. As long as you can retain a lot of your solid talent and you can develop those younger guys, get them into starting roles next season, you won't be in the worst place imaginable. But Not a great game all around for the Hokies. You need more than that. You need a lot more on offense. You want to see your defense hold up a little bit better over time. They crunched down once again. As Georgia Tech was moving the ball, they finally locked in, but gave up a lot of yards. Pretty talented offensive team, but you just need a little bit more than that. You would have liked to see closer to maybe a 20-point win. I mean, you only allowed 2 field goals, but a blocked field goal attempt as well on the Hokies. Just some sloppy moments out there, a lot of guys going down with injury, and it leads you to be a little bit worried about going to Syracuse, but at the same time, it could be a big bounce back game. This could be just the game where they got a little too comfortable, but they still scratched through, got the win. And you go back to the locker room, you look in the mirror and you say, you know what, we got the win, but that wasn't the way it should be. And you lock in, you get prepared for next week. So you're going to have to play better to beat Syracuse unless you see just a McCord failure and just a really, really bad game like what happened against Pitt the other week. But barring that, you really got to play better to feel comfortable about getting a win at Syracuse, which you need to keep things moving. And then you got, Duke and Clemson coming up. There's some tough games left on the schedule. So you can't fall asleep now. You can't take your foot off the gas. There's plenty of season left to go. But the Hokies have shown that they can battle through the tough times. They can bounce back from brutal games, from sloppy games. We've seen that all year, but they've bounced back well. They're on this nice win streak, and they keep things going. So we'll see what they do next week against Syracuse and how they finish out the season because it could be a very fun one.